Welcome to the Vertical MRO Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS. In this two-part interview, the Valor Flight Crew Podcast hosts team up with the Vertical MRO Podcast to bring a series titled Maintaining the Mission, where we welcome Faith Ortega, a maintainer with extensive experience across general aviation and currently in the helicopter air ambulance sector. Faith was a guest on the Vertical MRO Podcast in episode 2 and 3 and is one of our expert Vertical MRO co-hosts. This interview brings a different perspective and insight into Faith Ortega's career and the impact the maintenance community has on helicopter air ambulance operations. Faith offers a unique perspective on what it takes to keep aircraft safe, mission ready, and airborne, particularly in high-pressure environments where every second counts for patients. The conversation covers a range of topics from preventative maintenance and emergency repairs to the essential communication dynamics between mechanics, pilots, and med crews. Faith will also share her experiences teaching maintainers, transitioning from military to civilian aviation, and mentoring the next generation of technicians. Whether you're in the air, on the ground, or anywhere in between, this episode's a must-listen for anyone who understands that every successful mission starts with a well-maintained aircraft. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a review on the platform you use to listen to the Vertical MRO Podcast. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread the word about the importance of maintenance in helicopter aviation.
Special thanks to our sponsors for this podcast: Rotorcraft Repair and Manufacturing, Precision Aviation Group, Robinson Helicopter Company.
Welcome to the Vertical MRO Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS.
All right, everyone, your radar contact, you're cleared to the Bravo.
The Vertical MRO Podcast explores the fascinating world of helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul with your host, Val Medved.
Now, line altimeter 3029, approved as requested.
The podcast features helicopter technicians, mechanics, engineers, and MRO experts who share invaluable industry insight, knowledge, and stories that will inspire current and aspiring industry maintainers.
Hey, and welcome back to the Valor Flight Crew Podcast. I am your host, Blake, and I'm here with my other co-host, Mike. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing great today, Blake. How are you?
I'm doing good. Just trying to hang in there and keep my attention here instead of this fly that's in the room. So if you see me looking off, that's kind of why.
I hope we can get some of that on camera for YouTube.
I know, right? Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us today. We have a great episode. Today, on this episode, we are going to talk about our aircraft maintainers, and we have a wonderful maintainer that is joining us today. Her name is Faith Ortega. So Faith, I'll go ahead and let you just kind of give us a little introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Faith Ortega. I've been an A&P mechanic now for about 6-7-ish years. But particularly, I made the switch to EMS about a little over 2 years ago. So that was a whole new operation for me. So I've always worked Part 91, which is a much different operation than 135. And then going to the medical side of the house was a whole new ball game. So, but it's been good. I've had a lot of fun in my career, and it's opened up a lot of doors. And yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Well, we appreciate you being on. I know we're special creatures of habit on the EMS side. So I'm sure when you say it was kind of a different world, it definitely is. We are those creatures of habit. So, but we appreciate you coming over to the dark side, as we call it.
Very happy to have you on, Faith. I think we all interact with our maintenance crew on a daily basis, and I don't think we ever really get to pick their brains as much as we'd like to, and I'm sure they probably prefer it that way for the most part. But we appreciate you coming on and having the discussion with us. I think there's a lot of great conversation that we can have that can really bridge some of those gaps and break down some of those walls of communication. So we really appreciate you joining us and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an open book. So whatever you guys got.
We appreciate it. When Mike and I were really coming up with a lot of these ideas for the podcast, we were talking about, all our unsung heroes, that, our maintenance, y'all don't get enough love out there,
Not in the slightest.
Same thing, for your agencies, people that are behind the scenes, logistics, communications, all that. So like our biggest thing is we really wanted to highlight every and all aspects that keep this mission going forward. And so a huge part of that, honestly, is our maintainers. So again, we just solely thank you so much for joining us for this. So before we get started, I didn't forget this time, Mike. I know
I'm proud of you, Blake.
Probably banking on it.
You're getting better. I was ready to jump in and correct you there.
So Faith, what we like to do, we have a little icebreaker. If you don't mind, if you pull up your phone on your your playlist. My wife corrected me saying, I always say iPod, like people don't really know what iPods are, but it's all in one device.
You're just an
now.
old soul, Blake.
I am. But we like to know, what was the last song you were listening to? Who is it by?
Let me pop it open here.
I can go first if you'd like, but no judgment here today. I'm a little embarrassed about this one, but it was on the gym playlist. No, it was Juice by Lizzo.
Hey, it was a gym playlist, man.
It was the gym playlist. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, let's see. Let me pull up because I don't want to cheat here. Oh, I had a
no
throwback playlist going. So
nice.
It was Man Eater by Nelly Furtado, and I don't even remember listening to that.
Nice.
So it was rock yesterday. So
gosh,
definitely
like
throwing back a
Spring
little
Break
bit.
2002, man.
I think the guys, we were so sick of
Probably.
the rock. We were just like, hey, play something. So I was like 2000 hits and just let it rip.
There you go.
So.
I don't have anything that good. I was just listening to any random. So I was listening to Lie by NF.
All right. Sometimes you got to switch up a little bit. Blake's usually in the country mood, but lately he's been surprising me on a pretty regular basis.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying to broaden my horizons.
I'm proud of you.
Guessing. Well, I appreciate it. So Faith, can you tell us, just kind of give us a broad, just general overall, like what's your viewpoint and the role of like how aircraft maintenance, especially when it comes to the HEMS world and EMS, you talked about going from 91 to 135, those type of certificate and maintenance. Just give us kind of a flow, like how that was so different for you going from one to the next.
The rules and regs from 91 to 135, well, they're similar. One thing that was really new for me is if you go usually to a tourism operation or especially to an EMS operation, there's a lot more rules and policies about how they want you to do something, right? So they have to have something called a general operations manual or a maintenance operations manual that basically says how you plan to do something from start to finish. So usually it's just kind of the FAA's way of blessing something and saying, yep, we're cool with that. That makes sense. No, there's no way that someone could get into pickle here, and they kind of throw in their 2 cents. So, the way that most maintainers are taught when they go to their schooling or their education process is, you're responsible for the aircraft, make sure you're always using the proper manuals. And as long as you do all of these things, you're good. But then EMS is like, oh, hey, yeah, we have those rules, but there's also these that you have to follow as well. And they may not be what you're used to. So it wasn't a bad thing. It was just more hoops to jump through, but you get used to it pretty quick. So I think a lot of guys that work like what they call GA, which is general aviation, which is a lot more mom and pop, they're always kind of like, oh, no, they're like, that's so much red tape. And that's like going to school all over again, but it's really not. It's not that bad at all. So
the old bait and switch routine.
yeah.
That never happens in your world, right?
Yeah, it's really fun. I promise. Come do this.
No, I find that very interesting, and I give so much credit to our maintainers that I work with on a daily basis, and I feel like as med crew, like if there's one thing we're good at, it's breaking things for you and making your lives more difficult. But I feel like it's me like going to the car dealership when I go in and I'm like, well, it's making this weird noise, and then I kind of reenact the noise, and then it was rattling a little bit when I did this, and that doesn't sound right, or this is sticking here, or this is too loose here, and it doesn't really, I have no clue or concept of what you're doing. I'll save the heck out of your life, but don't ask me to fix anything mechanical. So my hat goes off to all of you that are doing this and on the wrenches every single day.
We feel the same. There's a reason I'm not a nurse or a medic or an EMT, and this is as close as I will ever get. So that's okay.
I love it.
We all have our strengths in life, right? But I find it interesting, so we do our briefs every morning, and we, talk about our pilots are usually given kind of the rundown, and they're talking about, we got 3 days to a 7-day. We got, 5 hours till, 10 hour, all these numbers are thrown out that are in regards to maintenance. And I'm sure a lot of that is, the preventative maintenance that's being done. If you're able to kind of talk through a little bit about like what some of that maintenance that you guys are doing on a daily basis and what, kind of things you're looking for. I mean, I see, my guys all over the aircraft checking every nook and cranny and trying to figure out, what could be going on and fixing things or just doing the preventative stuff. But I really don't know all that goes into that. I was wondering if you can kind of give us a little rundown of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So pilots are required to do pre-flight. So every day they're basically using a checklist, right? So they're not getting complacent and they're looking at key points on the helicopter. So is this leaking? Do you see any working rivets? Does this looks as it should? So basically it's a giant checklist that the pilots have to go through. Well, the thought process that a lot of EMS companies have is, hey, 2 is better than 1. So we will have the mechanics also go through that checklist. Usually, a lot of times you'll hear it referenced as a daily, and that's all it is a glorified pre-flight for us as well. Some companies use the exact same checklist that the pilots use. Some have a little bit of a differing one, but it's just making sure that they're looking at all of these key points around the helicopter, checking oil levels, because, it's really silly for us to not check something that may seem so rudimentary. Or like, well, yeah, why didn't you check that? But, doing it every day, it's super easy to get complacent. So that's why they're always on us in aviation about checklists, so you don't skip something. And then you've got the guys who are way more seasoned. And so they know areas that aren't on the checklist that are prone to having issues. And so their dailies might be even a little bit longer, more detailed, just because they know what to look for. But yeah, that's usually preventative maintenance in a nutshell. There are some things that pilots can do. Or pilot authorized maintenance tasks. So some pilots, depending on what company or what entity you work for, sometimes you can remove seats, you can add oil, kind of the basics. Usually every EMS company will have its own list of what they say you can and cannot do. But if you're in the mom and pop world, so like the Part 91, there's even longer list of the things you can do. So smaller little like airplane owners, they can go and change their own oil and the filters and all the things that come with. But EMS side, they're like, we'll leave that for the mechanic. They're super trained. They're not going to forget something if you're a newbie to this make and model. So we're just going to give you this short list that you guys can do.
I've definitely seen a lot of that kind of grow, like especially for everything that I see, especially around our base. And, when you talk about the dailies, our pilots, since they work 12 hours, so they change. I have been on night shift the past week. Yay.
We can tell, Blake. Thank you.
I know. I love it. The night pilot, they come in around 6 p.m. and med crew, we change at 7. When our pilot came in and then I got there an hour later, they were like, hey, we're going to be out of service because he found a minor detail, however, very significant, just doing the dailies, just by doing those things, like you said, that have the checklist, have that routine. And I think it's great because, you really get to see each pilot really taking the helm, especially at our base. We've had a lot of, heavy maintenance lately, replacing 2 rotor blades, So after doing that, they take that extra time for their pre-flights and they really go around and then finding the smallest little tolerance of like one of the nuts for one of the, I don't know what they're called, the pins that hold the rotor blade on to the main hub. There's 2 of them and they're like just the slightest, like smallest, like gap. But pilot found it and he was like, yep, I know that this is something. He goes, it's not a big deal, but we're out of service. Mechanic's going to come. They're going to make sure it's all set and good to go. And I was just really impressed by that, by being in depth and really taking a hold of, all right, I know we've had more maintenance or heavy maintenance, so they really go around and make sure that they look at these things repeatedly. So I think all those things are awesome to see.
And I think, once you obviously get to know your aircraft and know all the things that it is supposed to be on it and what's not supposed to be on it and all that stuff, I feel like where the level of respect comes from that I have is about the attention to detail on both our pilots and our maintainers, and to notice those small little things. Like, I mean, you guys are looking at these aircraft every single day, and you notice those minor discrepancies that really can have or make a world of difference. And so, again, mad respect for all of you that are out there. I like to say wrenching on the aircraft, but like you're doing so much more that is such detailed and precision work. And I wouldn't even know where to begin out there. So that's why I appreciate having this conversation, because these are realms that I know absolutely nothing about.
I feel like I'm never able to describe enough the issue that I encounter like in flight,
100%.
So I always feel when I go back and try to explain it, like our mechanics looking at me like, okay, I think I know what that is, and I'm like, no, I promise it was totally making this noise. You go out there and they're like, okay.
Thank you to our sponsor, Rotorcraft Repair and Manufacturing, manufacturer of DSX, Dragon Skin Extreme, an FFA approved rotor blade leading edge erosion corrosion protective coating with a proven record of durability in harsh environments like sand and rain. Contact Seth at rotorcraft.biz and stop wasting money on other so-called erosion coatings.
We get write-ups sometimes that look like that, and I'm like and it's easier. Most of the time they'll call, because they're like, okay, how do you want me to write this up? Because I've seen people like write it up and not ask like how we want to see it written up, or like describing the issue. And it cracks me up because sometimes it'll be like, well, I smelled this smell and I heard this noise, and sometimes this light flickers. And also, and it's like the squawk, and I'm like, whoa, I'm gonna hold on a second. And so like, usually they'll call and they're like, okay, let me break this down for you, what we experienced. I'm like, okay, got it. Like talk me through what happened. And then sometimes you guys know stuff can even be intermittent. So it happens, and then you're like, okay, we can't get it to happen again. And so the mechanics in the back with them, and they're like, where is it? Like, what are you hearing? Or what smells like fuel? Or like, what's the issue? And so intermittent is always like, anytime someone writes something up and they're like intermittent, I'm like, oh man, because I believe them. I believe you, because you're like, something's not as it normally is, but I don't know if it's wrong. So trying to describe it sometimes, like you said, just, talking to a car dealership, like it makes this noise on the highway, and you're trying to recreate it. Like,
I know. Yeah, I've always tried to take pictures or a video or get some type of like, hey, here's what it was. Because like I said, I am terrible at charades. So I'm a terrible reenactor. So I feel like the best way is if I just get a picture of it, or a quick video snapshot of something of it to relate to you guys, to be like, here's what it was. So I feel like that's my best way.
But here's the real question though. When we come to you with these stories and trying to tell you what's going on, as soon as we walk away, how long does it take all of you to sit back and start making fun of us for making all those noises?
I had to get on to some of my mechanics like that I work with, because like my thing is if you guys are coming to us with something, it's because maybe it made you feel uncomfortable for a split second, or you just want to be almost, validated that you did hear it or you did see it, even if it's normal. Because I always tell my guys that, I'm like, hey, even if what they're seeing or hearing is okay, just tell them that. And like, don't ever make them feel little, because that's the last thing you want to do, because then they're never going to tell you when there's an issue, or the vice versa. And they're going to be like, oh, well, I'm not telling that guy shit. I'm going to go to his boss or somebody else and have them, hey, he's not listening or she's not listening. And this is what's happening. And so sometimes, sometimes the pilots will giggle or the mechanics will giggle. Sometimes if the write-up is funny or there, and it's okay as long as you make them feel heard. That's what's important. You kind of laugh and you're like, no, it's supposed to do that. You're good. You're okay. I'll show you. We'll recreate it together. But yeah, like I said, there are sometimes where it is kind of like, I don't know what was going on there, but that's okay.
We'll check it out. We'll look at it. We'll check it out. So for when you guys are, so there's obviously the preventive maintenance and the things that are scheduled. Then obviously we all know the emergency repairs, right? Or the things that happen that we can't control. Can you explain a little bit to us? Are there differences from the Part 91 world to the EMS world, where we're flying on 135, where something might seem minor, but because of the different rules and regulations that are there, that something that would genuinely seem like an innocent or something small fix still requires a hard fact procedural resolution to that because of the name of safety? Can you kind of give us something like that example?
135, the great thing about operating EMS is most companies choose to have an MEL. So you've probably heard that term quite a bit from your pilot mechanic. Oh, well, MEL it, MEL it, or maybe even NEF. So basically it can be deferred. So if you defer something, typically that's kind of like your silver lining as a mechanic. The MEL is your back pocket playbook. Like there's so much stuff in there that aircraft are always built to be redundant. So a lot of times there are duplicate systems. That way, if one were to fail, you still have a backup. Or if it does fail, it fails in a safe position. So that's usually a lot of the thought process that goes into aircraft engineering. Well, it doesn't always exist for every single system. Sometimes you don't even need that system at all. So like your searchlight on your belly, right, of your aircraft. So if you guys go to land at a scene flight, there's nothing that actually says that you have to have a searchlight to operate during the day, right? So we don't need it at all.
Sure.
If the searchlight's broken, you guys could still probably take flights to other airports that are well lit, other hospitals, that sort of thing. But if the searchlight's broke, now we can't go pick up people in a cornfield or an off-site location. So MELs are fantastic for that kind of thing. Unfortunately, sometimes there are teeny tiny little pieces that are so insignificant, but they're not thought of to be put in an MEL, that if you can't find it in the MEL, then you're grounded. And it's for something so minute that you're like, why isn't this on the list? And they're like, well, it's never broke and no one's ever asked about it. So sometimes you're the first person to get it added to the list. That actually happened to moi probably like a year ago. I got
say this sounds like firsthand experience.
Yeah. So my pilot was like, hey, he called me up and he's like, hey, we have it's a push-pull vent in the front. So all it is it's a little flap. So if he doesn't want to kick on the AC, he can push this little tube and it'll let ram air in just as a nice little breeze. So he went to pull that little detent and there's a button on the tip of it and it came off in his hand. And so he was like, and it still moves. It still opens and closes the flap, but it's just the little detent button. And he was like, huh. And he even screwed it in and he was like, that was weird. So they finished, like then it happened when they were coming back to base. So he landed and they wrote it up. And so the other pilot, because they were getting ready to switch hitch, he was like, oh, that's got to be in the MEL. We'll write it up. We'll call Faith in the morning so she doesn't have to deal with it tonight. Like it'll be no big deal. So they wrote it up only to find out it wasn't in the MEL and it wasn't in the NEF. And they were like, so technically we're AOG, like aircraft on ground. We can't move until she double checks that this button is reinstalled, which we already kind of did. And so they were like, oh no. And so they called me and that pilot was like, he's like, I'll take you out for breakfast. I'll watch your call. And I'm like, what happened? Are you guys good? Are you stuck somewhere? And he's like, well, not really. We're back at base, but and he explains what happened. And he's like, I would have put my next paycheck that was in the MEL. And I'm like, it's okay, dude. Like, it's totally fine. So I went out there and checked it. I'm like, well, you reinstalled it. Great job. You did a fantastic job. It was just literally like a couple threads and he screwed it in. And so the next day I contacted a couple people at my company. I'm like, can we add this to the MEL? And they're like, probably. Send us some information. Yeah. So I was like, okay, cool.
Cool.
So.
Sounds like something definitely that can be MEL'd.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny because that really kind of leads into my next topic, like how these maintenance schedules, impact these flight availabilities, right? So like for something so minute, right? But that basically keeps that aircraft out of service for an extended period of time, especially if it's not on an MEL list, like for something so minute, right?
Especially because it happens on off hours just after you've gotten home and relaxed for the night, Faith. And it never happens during the daytime when you're already present at the base, right?
Right. Or you were there for like 8 hours of the day, so now you have no more time.
You're timed out.
Yeah. Worst probable scenarios for those. But I feel like companies and maintainers specifically, I've always seen a really good job on planning maintenance around either like bad weather, just really trying to schedule early in the mornings, like those kind of low peak times. Sometimes they'll come in at like 5:30 in the morning, try to get it done before, the morning rush or things kind of pick up. So, do you do things like that strategically, or do you just go by what the aircraft maintenance schedule is, or do you try to plan those? How does that kind of schedule maintenance how do you plan those to where it doesn't affect the flight availability?
It always, usually, if it works out in your favor, exactly like you said, we'll try to do it on a weather day, and try to optimize that. So that way you couldn't fly it anyway, so we can take it from you for a little bit. Crew availability. So sometimes there are some locations, staffing might be an issue, if they're out in the boonies and maybe they've got 2 full-time pilots and then the other 2 are workover pilots. So it's just kind of who they can get to fill sort of deal. Those are optimal days if they don't have a full crew. And that was something that was new to me is usually if you're flying, anything but EMS, you only really need a pilot, right? As long as you got a pilot, it's one person you're dependent on, they can go. But for you guys, it's the pilot, the nurse, and the medic, or the pilot, nurse, and nurse. And so if one of those 3 staple people aren't there, it's not moving. That was also new to me. So I was like, oh, well, there's people here. Like, you guys can still go. And they're like, nope, like we're down a person and we can't go with just one. And I was like, oh, okay. Usually we'll try to schedule it, like I said, on crew days, weather days. But there are just some times when it's a beautiful sunny day and everybody's there and we don't have the choice, which kind of stinks. But the nice thing about maintenance is you can always do maintenance early. So let's say you've got like 10 hours until a schedule needs to be completed. I can do it now, or I can let the time dwindle down to 1 hour, or right at where it's got, 0.1 hours or something crazy, almost nothing left to the buzzer. But like I said, sometimes we don't have the luxury and they want to let it rip all the way to the end. And so it really just depends on your base, how much they fly, your aircraft, how much there is a need for it. I always like to do my maintenance early because I get anxious leaving like no time for a weekend. I hate that feeling so much that I'm like, okay, they normally only fly 3 hours a day and I have 12 hours, but I don't know. I just got this gut feeling they're going to take a ton of patience and then they're going to call me on Sunday and then I'm hosed, So some guys, I've met some older guys and they're like, you got so much time on there, sister. Let it rip, let it go. And I'm always like, So I'm one of those nervous Nancys that will do stuff more often because I'm like, it's fine. I'll just take it out and do it real quick. So that way they're not waiting on me. So kind of luck of the draw. Everyone kind of has their own method to the madness. But one thing I was really appreciative of is the company that I work for, they kind of leave it up to you. So every mechanic has their own way of doing it. So they say, you schedule maintenance. That's on you. If you need assistance or help, phone a friend. We'll get you people, tools, parts, whatever you need. But you want to do it super early or a little bit later, that's your choice. So I'm glad that they kind of let us do that and have some freedom with it.
It's kind of nice to have that autonomy a little bit. I feel like it's a constant like juggling game for you guys. I'm at a smaller program where, I feel like those hours and days constantly end up being almost the bane of our existence because it's like, we got to move this aircraft over here so that we can take care of this, and this, and then we need to move this aircraft over to this place. And it's this constant juggling game back and forth, trying to figure out when each of these aircraft are going to need all these. Then, not only then factoring in T inspections on top of all of that, there's so much that goes into that whole process. I have no idea how you end up keeping all that straight. I'm sure, at least I'm hoping it's a little bit easier if you're assigned to like one particular aircraft that you kind of know inside and out. But I'm sure for plenty of our maintainers out there who are, juggling multiple aircraft, I'm sure that's got to be a constant challenge for all of them.
Oh, yeah. We have the nice thing about most bigger companies is they have a great tracker. So that software does a fantastic job. And the pilots are very diligent about saying, okay, I took a 2.2 hour flight. And as soon as they enter that, the hours I had 10.2, it's now dwindled to 8 hours. It really stays on top of it. But if you work for a smaller company, it's a little bit more laissez-faire. And they're like, oh, yeah, we flew a couple hours the other day. I think it was 3. I could check the times. And you're like, okay, well, I have to know. So I need you to go put that time in now because you could take it and be over. You don't want that ever. It's not good. So, but that's one thing I was happy to see is that they are on the ball, especially with EMS when it comes to times, and everyone's got to make sure the numbers are straight and all that good stuff. So it takes a lot of the stress off of us as individuals. Now, usually there's a team of people behind the scenes that are even dealing with the logistics side of things, and they're thank God that a lot of companies are starting to invest in those group of folks, because it really takes the load off of a mechanic's back too.
Allows you to focus on doing, what you love doing too.
Yeah. Yeah. Ask any mechanic how much he loves doing paperwork and you'll get a really long,
exactly.
yeah, joyful answer.
Hopefully gone are those days of just paper logging and being like, all right, hopefully I added these hours correctly that I'm down to the wire, where now that is put into software where it tells you, hey, in 5 hours, this is due, and it keeps that going. So hopefully we've made some good strides in technology to make that easier.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Yeah, it's definitely starting to go that way. I take care of 2 helicopters outside of EMS, and they're old school. It's all hand jammed. It's all paper logs. It's all me doing the number crunching. And I have a little booklet in there that I make them write every time. I'm always checking the total times and having to go back and forth. And I will say, like, taking care of a EMS ship versus, we flew a couple hours the other day, and I'm like, okay, well, I've got a giant sticker in here that says, how many hours do you have left, sir? And they're like, okay. I'm like, don't overfly it. So they haven't. They've been really good. They know. They're like, Faith's strict with that. They're like, she won't let us get in trouble.
So I was also curious about, so Faith, do you have a military background at all?
I actually do not. I'm one of the few that doesn't.
You do not. I say, so I'm just curious as to like what brought you down the maintenance route. And I'm sure you work with plenty of maintainers who probably did have a military background. Are you able to kind of touch upon maybe some of the differences of somebody coming from a civilian background versus somebody coming from a military background, and what some of those challenges may be getting into the HEMS world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am probably the rare percentage of people that does not have a military background and is in helicopter maintenance, especially. So we get a lot of our guys, a lot of Coast Guard guys, we get a lot of Army guys, pretty much everybody,
Yeah.
Marines. What I've noticed is the people that make the transition, the military does things very similarly and so similar, but all of the acronyms and everything are different. So I always feel so bad for those guys because they finally get a grip on how maintenance is performed in the military, and they get out here and they're like, oh, it's going to be the exact same. And now there's a new set of rules they have to follow.
Yep.
Usually it's not taking care of the helicopter. That's the issue. That's the easy part. Once they're ran through the make and model and they kind of understand the structure of, when intervals hit, we do 100 hours, 300 hours, 600 hours. Airbus does theirs a little bit different by like work package versus Bell. It just depends on the product, but usually that's the easy part for them. It's the paperwork and the rule book that gets kind of tricky. So they usually do very, very well, though, because something else I've noticed is that EMS is always really structured. I won't say like the military. I can't attest because I wasn't in, but it seems like a lot of the terms and a lot of the policies and procedures are very parallel. So they'll kind of make things similar. So a lot of the guys that are coming in, they've noticed the way that we do things is pretty dress like they're used to. So, but yeah, a lot of them, they really like it. I've noticed that with pilots too. A lot of the pilots that were at my base were Coast Guard guys. And so they were like, yep, wake up, we have a mission. Like, we understand if we can do the mission or if we can't do the mission, if there's some underlying circumstance, and, we know what we have to do to get the ball rolling to fix that so we can take the mission. So, but yeah, on the maintenance side of the house, though, I know people joke and they'll say a helicopter's a helicopter, but the guys really seem to figure it out pretty quick. Like I said, I have no issues with that. Usually it's the paperwork and the lame side that they're always like, oh my God, can you explain this again? Or what does this acronym mean? And I'm like, you're good. Like, we'll sit down and I'll hammer it out and we'll show you everything. So
I've always heard, like, when I've heard most of the like complaints or like, like just the proverbial gripes of things, it's it's just like those little intricacies of like how things have to be documented and how you do those things, but also the aircrafts themselves, the airframes, like there's a 135, but there's different variations of that type aircraft as well that can exist. Like where we're at, our mechanics can work on 3 different variations between bases, of which each aircraft has and doesn't have. While it's still a 135, it has different things, different packages, different things. So I can only imagine whether it's Bell, Augusta, anything like that. I could just only imagine. Like that's one of the most common gripes I hear. They're like, "Oh, I'll work on this aircraft. It's super simple," and then the other ones that have all the autopilots and all these other, they're like, "Oh man, what a nightmare." So I've always heard those are like some of the biggest gripes that come to. It's not the maintaining the aircraft; it's just those little variances that make it challenging.
Oh yeah, and it's funny too because you can tell working with like the majority of the guys that I work with are usually around my dad's age, right? So it's really rare to find mechanics in there. I would say 30s is getting similar, like a little bit more popular. 20s is really, really rare, and like fresh out of A&P school is super rare. It's funny to see how the generations on the shop floor have their own opinions about makes and models too, because it's like if you ask anybody, like, "Oh, what's your favorite car?" And someone's going to tell you a classic, like a Chevelle or a Nova or a Camaro. And those guys are like, "I want to work on a Bell 206 for the rest of my life, and everything else is horrible." And then you get the younger generation, and they're like, "Oh, I like, BMW or Audi or whatever it is that they like." And they're like, "No, I like the autopilot Fadale control." Like they like more of the new stuff. And so it's funny to see the lines in the sand, but I've definitely worked with my fair share of people that are like, "I hate the Bell 407. And I'm like, "Dude, the manual's written so much better. It's so laid out so nice." And they're like, "Yeah, whatever." They're like, "You kids can have them. I don't want them." And I'm like, "Okay, well."
Kids.
Yeah. But I think that kind of like hits home a really interesting point though too, and that there are so many different, not only generations of aircraft, but generations of mechanics. And there are definitely people that have their specialties within each of those iterations, if you will. So like, we've got a lot of older aircraft. And so I find it interesting, hearing the guys talk sometimes, and, you're right. Yeah. Some of them like, the older style aircraft, some of them like the new ones with the FADEX in there, but at the end of the day, whether they're older or new, they still have gremlins, right? And that's what I like to call it, that there's always gremlins within the aircraft. But we have to call upon our, oh, well, so-and-so is really good with this electrical system, so we're going to make sure that this person, double checks me on all of this. And, well, so-and-so is good with this system that's not so automated and tracing back, where these minuscule little things are that we're having that's causing a light somewhere. And it sometimes takes our mechanics, sometimes weeks to figure out certain things with some of the aircraft because of how aging they are. And it's definitely mind-blowing to me for how they're able to diagnose some of those things. Because when I see you guys start taking parts of the aircraft, especially when it starts to get to the electronics area and that front nose cone of the aircraft, like there are way too many wires and things going in all different places. So it certainly gets to be very complicated. But I'm curious, do you specifically have like something that you are super passionate about when it comes to maintaining these aircraft? That is something that really just kind of, when you wake up in the morning, you're like, yes, I really get to take care of this today. Like this is an issue that I'm looking forward to dealing with.
So I worked at a bigger facility. I don't know what they call it at your guys' respective companies, but here we call them RMOs. So it's like the heavy maintenance centers. In the military, they called it depot level maintenance. And so that's where like you're ripping out the transmission or the freewheeling unit or like big ticket items, replacing them or overhauling them. And so I used to work for a company. We used to overhaul them and do everything. So I could potentially rip a transmission, shadow the guy that was overhauling it, and then reinstall it. EMS is a little bit different. They'll usually just send you the new one you plug and play, which is still quite a bit of work. Not making it sound light at all here, but that's my favorite is when it's down like that. I would take that over. My comm sounds scratchy because then it's like, I have no idea. I'm like that's when like I lose all the color in my face and I have to call like 3 people and I'm like, man, I don't know. I'm not a good Sparky. That's my downfall is avionics, but I'm trying to make myself get better at it. But that's what people usually call them are Sparkies, but not a good Sparky. So working on it.
I like
not a good Sparky.
Sparky. That's awesome.
I like that.
but trying to get better at that. But I like big, heavy duty maintenance. And so that's my favorite because, they could basically put an aircraft in the corner and be like, hey, this is probably a 2-week job for one guy, but if you got 2-3 guys, it'll probably take you 3-4 days. And I can just kind of put in my AirPods and talk and do whatever. But it is nice, like you said, though, to know a guy or have a guy that knows what's going on, because there have been times before where I'm like really scratching my head and I'm like, dude, I don't even know where to start. And I'll call somebody and it's like 6 a.m. Like, you want the guy's phone number that's already been awake since 4 and is like 6 cups of coffee in, last in CCR, that's been doing it for 30 years.
Absolutely.
That's who I want to call.
No
and
doubt.
I'm like,
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm like, Bob, what do I do? Like, and they're like, oh, just check this, and this, and call me back. See you later. Bye. And I'm like,
they're like, see you,
cool,
Sparky.
Yeah. I'm like, God, I love you. Thank you so much.
Pays to know somebody.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh yeah. That's half of our industry, is just figuring out who that person is, and they'll call you too, and it's a 2-way street, which is awesome. So it always makes me feel good when someone calls me, a couple months later after I've been dealing with an issue, and they're like, hey, have you ever seen this happen? Someone said that, you've had this happen before, and how did you fix it, or how did you deal with it? What'd you do? And so that's really important as networking. Even though we're kind of a reclusive bunch, we do still all talk to each other. So
yeah, I was kind of joking before saying that I feel like every time I start like walking to the maintenance side of the hangar that my guys typically like scatter like cockroaches because they're like, oh no, what did you break now?
Mike's coming,
like,
dude.
Who's drawing the short straw to deal with whatever issue he caused right now? And I love my guys to death for all of that. But yeah, they certainly, we like to razz on each other a little bit. But, seeing just some of that, especially the heavy maintenance, like watching our aircraft go through T inspection every 600 hours. It's so impressive to see how much labor intensive work goes in. And like, you guys literally take that thing apart to the point where it doesn't look like a helicopter anymore and somehow manage to put it back together and know where all the parts and pieces go. Like, that's just insane to me. Like, I would have at least a few hundred pieces left over afterwards trying to figure out where they go. So I don't know how the hell you guys do it all, but yeah.
I know, like, our primary aircraft right now is in 2 different parts of the country right now. Like the tail rotor part of it is at Airbus somewhere. And then the main part of it is at another part. And they're like, yeah, no worries. We'll get this back from the manufacturer. We'll put it all back together and we'll fly it right back to you. I just have that fear, like, when you were a kid, you build Legos, and you put all this together and you have like 6 parts left over, and you're like, oh man, what did I miss? I always feel like that would be me. I could never be an aircraft maintainer. I couldn't do it.
It's a lot of repetition. I try to put it into perspective because my husband, he's a car guy. And so I'm like, could you imagine having to rip somebody's transmission out every 5,000 miles? And he's like, no, that's asinine. Like, that's absolutely insane. And I'm like, yeah, like that's what we're doing. Like, with the engine, with the transmission, all the different life limited piece parts. Like, could you imagine taking out your drive shaft just to get a better look at it? And he's like, no, that's ludicrous. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, maintenance would be so high. And I'm like, that's why not everybody owns a helicopter,
Exactly.
That is so true. But the reasons are there, but it's all for safety, right? That just shows that these aircraft, these machines with the technology and everything put into it, that's why they're able to continue to perform. It's because they're so well maintained.
Yeah, that's what we always say is you can't pull over on a cloud. So you gotta
Nope.
We're not letting you get to that point. So
exactly. I like that mantra. But I think that kind of brings us into, or leads us into the next kind of question that we had for you with regards to some of the challenges that you face with maintaining some of these HEMS aircraft. And I know that there's, different specifications that you guys have to go by, but we kind of touched on some of those things a little bit, but are you able to kind of go into depth a little bit more about some of the environmental factors maybe that you guys may be dealing with out there, maybe some of the operational demands that are put on our maintainers, so that we have a little bit better understanding of some of the things that maybe you guys are going through on maybe a quarterly basis with season changes or things along those lines?
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Your environment is everything, right? So I think you guys are both in Florida. Am I correct in saying that?
No, I'm in Pennsylvania.
Okay. So you're up to coast.
Not all of us live in 80-degree weather year round.
Facts.
I can't imagine having to take care of a helicopter where near where you are, the salt laden environment. Those mechanics have to do almost twice the work. It's crazy just to combat corrosion. It's insane. I'd never seen what that was like firsthand until the last company I used to work for. They had several helicopters down in Miami. I was actually Fort Lauderdale, some little bitty airport, and we went over and I was helping him do a bunch of inspections. And he literally handed me, it was a spray bottle, and he's like, "Hey, can you wipe the blades down with this?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I jump up there and I'm like, "Dude, is this WD-40? And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "We're wiping the surface down with WD-40. He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "You have to, or it'll crystallize and they'll be junk tomorrow." I'm like, "No way."
Wow.
And he's like, "Yeah, it's in the book." And so sure enough, he's like, "I'll pull it up for you for a little fun fact when you go back, inland." And I'm like, "Okay." And so sure enough, he pulled it up and I'm like, "Dude, I've never seen this." But
Yeah, they
sometimes
do washouts weekly, engine washes and flushes with water, just constantly trying to get all this salt air to corrosion resist. Yeah.
those mechanics do literally twice the work. I always feel so bad for those guys. I know they're probably used to it, but if they were to move further inland, they'd be like, "Oh my God, this is so easy."
So you're never going to work near ocean, I take it.
I'll never say never. I shouldn't say never, but man, that is quite the job. But I mean, between, you're looking at different temperatures, those play a key factor in maintenance. So on the Vertical MRO podcast, we had a guest on there that had some helicopters in the Arctic Circle. And he was talking about what they go through just because of their environment and just rubber deteriorating because it doesn't actually soften the ride anymore because the rubber's rock hard and all of the flight controls. And it's just crazy to hear the extremes that sometimes these helicopters are kept in. But other than weather, we're also dealing with equipment. If a helicopter breaks down in the middle of a cornfield and it's the fifth chip light, I can't pull the engine now because I have no hoist. I have no protection from the elements, nothing. So, I feel bad for some of the guys that work in more remote places because they're always trying to think or really strategically plan, okay, I don't have a hoist, I don't have this, I don't have that, I got to get it to this facility. God forbid it breaks down before it gets to the facility because now what? Now we got to get a truck and trailer, and that's usually quite the show as well to get it loaded. So, yeah. But there's a lot of things that are definitely weighing in. And that's why every time, a helicopter breaks down, if you guys ever call the mechanics, please don't be on a hospital pad. Please don't be on a major highway. Please.
Yeah. And that was actually kind of my next, tailor question or tailed on question for you is what kind of pressures are there on you guys in those situations? Because I feel like obviously that's the last thing you want to happen is, for this aircraft to have, a failure that grounds them on a helicopter pad somewhere or in the middle of a highway where, you're now shutting down traffic or you can't bring any other patients into that helicopter pad. What kind of pressures are you guys under in those particular situations? And how do you, quickly figure out what's going on and what kind of overhaul or maintenance is going to need to be taken care of in those moments?
A lot of times, if something like that has happened and the helicopter ends up in an unfortunate place, usually what I'll do right away is call the pilot and ask him what it was that was happening so I can kind of get a game plan together. Usually if they're like, "Hey, it was a chip light," or "Hey, I heard this noise," whatever the case was, usually I will already start to compartmentalize what I think it could be. Okay, so it's in this area. I'm going to need these tools. If I got to get to the pylon, I need this screwdriver, this set, this, all these special tools, whatever the case may be. And usually I'll call someone else too en route. So I'll be like, "Hey man, am I missing anything? Take me from start to finish before I get there." Because that's the tricky part sometimes is, knowing what to pack. And I can't tell you how many times I've packed and I'm like, yep, I have everything. And then I get to the job and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot like the key element here or whatever it was I was needing. And so then you're running back or it's down longer. So usually I'll call and get a couple opinions and be like, hey, this is what happened. This is what I'm thinking it is. Would you concur with your experiences that sounds about right? I have a list of consumables here and stuff I'm going to need, like oil and a filter, whatever. Is there anything I'm forgetting? Oh, well, if it's this, you're going to want to bring that tool. Or is anyone en route to help you? Yeah, there's another guy, but I think he literally just woke up, so I don't want to call him yet. I'm letting him get his feet planted before I...
He needs coffee.
Yes, he needs his coffee.
Yeah, so it just depends. But the guy that mentored me at my first job, man, that guy... I tell him all the time, I'm like, I don't think you realize how much you're worth, man. Because I used to go up and down the ladder, even just in the comfortability of my hangar. I'd get up and down the ladder 10 times and I'm like, and he's like, you need a 1/2 inch, you need a 3/8, you need a set of side cutters and this. And I'm like, dude, where were you at 10 minutes ago? So I didn't have to hold in my hand. But that guy, I feel bad because I know how great he is at his job now. So I'm like, hey, man, I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
He's like, uh-oh. And he's cool. He's always like, what's going on? What happened? And so I'll tell him, hey, I'm en route for this job. And, I'm trying to rack my brain as to what it could be. And he's like, I would check this, and this. If I were you, that's where I would probably start. You're going to want to bring this, and this. And I'm like, awesome, cool. Thanks, man. So, but yeah, I'm like, I won't give your number out. I promise, but you're my secret tool. So
You got to have one of those though. But I feel like, in that situation, I kind of equate you guys to like trauma surgeons, right? Like you got to go out there into the field and you got to like diagnose this problem real quick. And then you got to be able to take care of it. And we all know that, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's probably a squirrel. And so you've got to constantly be ready for something else when you get in there, because you never know what kind of problems you're going to unravel. And so like, I just like, you're out of your element and you don't have all of the tools necessary. So to be able to like have that forethought to think through exactly how each pieces of that puzzle are coming together to be ready for whatever, I'm sure that's got to be nerve wracking on your part.
yeah, sometimes it's usually when the situation is like it is, if you're in an unfortunate place, a lot of times though, people are going to be a lot more understanding. Like, oh, we woke her up at 1 a.m. and she thought she grabbed all her tools and it was this special circumstance. She didn't have it. So they'll have someone meet me halfway and run me what I need. That kind of stuff. They're almost a lot more like, we get it type deal. But honestly, his worse is when it's like, hey, we're going to do this job in 2 weeks and you have time to prep for it. And you're like, yes, I have everything. I have a master list. And then the day comes and you're like, oh my God, I forgot this. And it's this tiny little thing that's going to be a showstopper. That's actually worse probably, because then everyone's like, how did you not know?
You had 2 weeks.
Yeah. You're like, you knew. You've done this 12 times. And you're like, oh. So that happens too, though.
I feel like, in the EMS world, I'm sure that sometimes we throw our maintainers through a loop. I know personally, I didn't personally rip the door off the side of the aircraft. My partner did. But it also happened to be...
Way to blame your partner, Blake.
And 1,000%. And I hope he ever hears this one day and he'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But he ripped the door off as we're loading this patient, super sick patient, in a crime scene on like this very remote island. Yeah. So and I remember as I looked at him through the rear of the aircraft to the side where he's holding the door to where we grab the patient and we go back across the field, and the EMS crew's like, why are they coming back? They don't normally come back with the patient. We're like, hey, we need your ambulance.
By the way,
long story, but I just remember the pilot having to call the mechanic and be like, so
you're never going to believe what just happened,
man. And when you get here, you're going to need to go through like the crime scene log. You're going to have to go just this whole thing. So again, my hat's off to you guys for the places that aircraft do end up and the things that you
for
have
some
to
reason,
do.
Blake, that doesn't surprise me with you.
And then, but when you were talking about like, okay, so if I know that it was only the door, so I know I need this, and this, hopefully they prefaced that, hey, this is also an active crime scene. So you better make sure you have everything you need because you don't get to do this.
No,
twice.
because I'm willing to bet that you are the only one that has ever made a mechanic go into a crime scene like that and go through all those.
And the mechanic more or less made the news of going to the aircraft versus anybody else. So,
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
so, these environmental factors, these operational demands, I can only imagine the things that you've seen coming into the HEMS world of where, it's Murphy's Law. I think that I attribute it to that. I don't intentionally rip doors off of aircraft, but I think that, it, sometimes it puts you in a precarious situation, and it just kind of obviously makes it not the most ideal place to fix an aircraft, right? Like the helipad of a hospital. But then if that's the place, so you're like, all right, I got to fix this. But then now you run into the availability of the parts that you need. So not only can we fix it, but can we get the part? So how, I know I just see from what I can, from the med crew looking in at the maintenance level, and we see, hey guys, we got to get this part, but it's coming from Colorado. It's going to be on a Delta flight today. They're going to courier it, so like, and I know this happens all across the country every day. I know it's a headache, but how is that really like, those are the things you can't plan for, right? So like, how are these parts availability? Are we seeing less parts being available, more parts being utilized? How is that kind of really affecting your day-to-day work?
So it depends on the complexity of the part. So a lot of times bases or bigger maintenance facilities will have a lot of the common things, the commonalities that go wrong. But you do have those one-off circumstances where you're like, I've never seen this broke before, and it's broke or it's cracked or it doesn't look the way it should. So I will say working at a base, you're even more limited. So a lot of times you have the disposable stuff. So you have like O-rings and packings and gaskets, cotter pins, safety wire, the little piddlier stuff, so to speak.
Right.
The RMOs or the bigger maintenance facilities typically will have a little bit more. But yeah, you're kind of at the mercy of who near you has what. So I figured that out pretty quick because the last company I worked for, I was at the big maintenance facility. So I had a room with rows and rows and rows of parts. I mean, I almost had an entire helicopter disassembled new.
Wow.
So if I needed, it was great. And I took that for granted when I worked there, I'll tell you that, because I used to go in there and be like, oh, this is broke and this is the part number. And I could actually go physically grab it and be like, yep, same part number, looks the same, we're good. Double check the book for applicability, all that good stuff. And the really painful thing sometimes being remote is you'll order a part and you're like, yep, same part number, same everything. And then you get it and you're like, this is not the same part. And like, oh, there's an upgrade, there's a mod, there's a kit, there's a whatever. And that's the new superseded part number. And then you're like, okay, well, I needed this one right now. And you gave me this one and this one will not work with what I'm dealing with. And so that sometimes is painful too. And again, a lot of times if it's a very detailed or specific, serial number part, a lot of times I will get a second opinion because there's nothing worse. And it only has to happen to you once and get burned that you're like, okay, I'm going to have somebody double check me because now I'm really waiting. And in AOG situations or when the aircraft's on ground, that's the most unfortunate. So yeah, at Aerovac, that's where I work. I hadn't seen couriers used very much until I started working for an EMS company, and they will waste no time. And so they're like, hey, such and such
Uber,
has that.
Lyft,
Yes.
that like I've seen parts arrive, like some Lyft dudes like, yo, this thing better give me 5 stars for this because I'm driving across the state to get you this gasket. But yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Or you do a drug deal in a parking lot. You're like, you
know,
don't
right?
even
Yeah.
know the guy. And you're like, you're Dave, right? And they're like, yeah, Faith. And I'm like, yeah, nice to meet you. And they hand you it and you're just out of there. And everyone's like, what just happened? And you're like, I don't.
Like, don't worry about it. Just parts. It's parts.
Mind the business.
Yep. It just shows like the willingness that, all companies have to like get our aircraft back in service. We do have an essential service and everybody plays such an important role. So I feel that, as comical as it is for me to sit back, but when I used to work for the auto parts, I used to work at a dealership years ago, like kind of the same thing. You would just be like, hey, this is obviously before Uber and all that ever existed, but like you would just like call up like maybe your other parts dealers, like, hey, if you're swinging by, do you mind grabbing that? We'll throw you a pizza or something if you help us out. Like, so it is really cool to see people like going to those links, however that part needs to get there. It makes it, I will say that. And it's been at 3 a.m. because I've had to wait up where everybody else goes home and they're like, oh, by the way, we need someone to stay at the base, and it can't be the mechanic because they're going home to rest. So, because they're going to fix it at 5 a.m., but you get to stay overnight and please wake up when this part arrives.
We've even done that like company to company. Like there's been times where I'm out of town and then I'm like we don't have a part. And then this is the last company I worked for. And we'd be like, wait, there's a helicopter tourism place down the street. And they, on their profile picture, have a Bell 407. And I'm like, hey, you don't know me from Adam, but do you have 4 quarts of this special kind of oil? And they're like, we do. And I'm like, name your price. Can I come pick it up? And they're like, sure. And I'm like, we've done that in a pinch before. And they're like, okay. Nice. And then if we're like, if you ever need anything, like we're right down the street and we have some things. So, humor us if you need something.
But I feel like that's becoming, more common within the industry as these fleets are aging across the country, right? Like, I look at where I'm flying at, and I think our oldest aircraft that we have was originally assembled in 1988. You'd never know it because of how amazingly our maintainers, keep that aircraft looking like brand new. But it's obviously a pretty real issue for a lot of companies out there as these aircraft are continuing to age more and more, and getting parts for these aircraft becomes more and more difficult across not just the country, but across the world at some point. The companies are all evolving and they're not making certain aircraft anymore. And of course, that always happens to be the one that you end up flying. And so now you can't get the parts that you need. Are you starting to see that as a frustration when you talk to other maintainers out there? Are these a lot of things that they're feeling, pressure on to be able to, keep these aircraft up and running with less and less availability?
Stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Rotorcraft Repair and Manufacturing, manufacturer of DSX, Dragon Skin Extreme, an FFA approved rotor blade leading edge erosion corrosion protective coating with a proven record of durability in harsh environments like sand and rain. Contact Seth at rotorcraft.biz and stop wasting money on other so-called erosion coatings.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Thank you for joining us on the Vertical MRO Podcast, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS. In this 2-part series titled Maintaining the Mission, the Valor Flight Crew Podcast hosts teamed up with the Vertical MRO Podcast to welcome Faith Ortega, an experienced maintainer in the helicopter air ambulance sector. Faith, who previously appeared as a guest in episodes 2 and 3, has now become one of the expert co-hosts on the Vertical MRO Podcast. She provides invaluable insights into the crucial role of the maintenance community in air ambulance operations. In this episode, we explored a range of essential topics, including the importance of preventative maintenance, emergency repairs, and the vital communication dynamics between mechanics, pilots, and medical crews. After enjoying this series, be sure to explore additional episodes from the Valor Flight Crew Podcast, available at verticalhelicast.com. Also, don't forget to follow the Vertical MRO Instagram account at vertical.mro, where we share everything related to helicopter maintenance, repair, and overhaul. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a review on the platform you use to listen to the Vertical MRO Podcast. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread the word about the importance of maintenance in helicopter aviation.